Justice Tech Pros here. I was thinking about everything going on in the world today, and one thing that I do believe, regardless of different details on which people may or may not agree, I think every reasonable person would agree that corruption is the main problem and actually should be the main focus of everything going on. And when you deal with law enforcement, especially, if you have a corrupt law enforcement official or anybody in a position of power where it relates to specifically the legal system, it's an issue. And I think that's really what the focus should be. I mean, I know a lot of, different factions and different groups have focus that's important to them, and rightfully so. Everybody has different outlooks on things and what they want to get across and what they want to focus on. But I think everybody could find common ground that corruption at any level is unacceptable. I mean, regardless of what you're dealing with, if you are faced with law enforcement or you are faced with the legal system, you just want to be treated fairly. And it shouldn't be where it's a pick and choose type thing. In relation to what's going on now, people shouldn't be targeted based on their skin tone, shouldn't be targeted based on their ethnicity. It should be across the board, the same set of rules and the same treatment should apply to all. And it doesn't. I mean, where it relates with a lot of the things I've been involved with, when it has to do with Italian Americans, there's a lot of things that go on that the public isn't aware of as far as fair treatment. And I've discussed it in great detail in past episodes of actions that happen and things that take place, where it kind of shines a spotlight on how the law is not followed and how certain individuals are not granted the right of a fair trial and fair due process. And more recently, in the news, which grabbed the headlines, I mean, you see, for instance, that individual, George Floyd. I mean, the guy was basically murdered, on a live video. And nothing about that on any level should be acceptable or expected. It's just another example in that instance of a cop, an officer having some kind of internal rage or some kind of reasoning to target somebody. And if you look at the bigger picture, that's a problem in of itself. In that case, it was a problem with tragic results. What happens a lot of the times is you have similar results in the sense that somebody's life could be jeopardized and could be ended based on an individual who has power controlling their fate and targeting them and kind of doing things where it relates to more of a personal agenda as opposed to how it should play out legally and justly. And it's unfortunate that the theme has shifted a bit from that, where everybody should kind of be focusing on just corruption at every level and trying to get a handle on that and getting that to where it should be a clean slate and building off of that, allowing all people who have to go through the process not be targeted, but be judged based on actual crimes and be judged based on facts and evidence and not have bias and preconceived notions determine how things play out. And now, I mean, it's going to another level, where we have, which my personal view, I just don't agree with it. I know people have a different perspective on it, but you're seeing an attempt to erase history. they're destroying and they're ripping things down, and people are taking their frustration out on statues and symbols. And to me, it doesn't accomplish much because you can't erase history. And the way I look at things is that was a period in time. And I'm not saying whether it was right. Obviously, a lot of the individuals, that there are maybe statues of and representations made of, obviously their views and their philosophies are antiquated. And it's just not that time now. But to destroy it and try to erase it, it doesn't really accomplish anything. The focal point should probably be, in my opinion, that was the period then, and that's not who we are as a people now. That's not what we represent now. And to try to just erase it is living in a fantasy world, because you're trying to make it as if it never happened, and that's just not the case. All of those things, all of these individuals, they all led us to where we are at this point in time. So to really work on change, you have to focus on the present and the potential future and try to change it based on that. You can't try to erase something. I equate it to almost putting your fingers in your ear and talking so you don't hear reality. Like when a child doesn't want to hear what the parents have to say, and they cover their ears and they scream so they don't have to hear it. I equate it to that, because just because you're trying to shield yourself from something doesn't make it not true. And just because you may not believe in something or support something, by trying to eliminate it or destroy it, it still doesn't solve the problem. If you really want to solve the problem, it's about change, and it's about implementing change. And the steps to do that is through education and through intelligence, trying to understand. It's by understanding the mistakes made, and how do we move forward to create a better atmosphere, to create a fair atmosphere across the board, not just for one group of people, but across the board, for just every individual in our country on a whole. Just to have it hand in hand, where everybody gets treated fairly, same rights, same privileges. And what's dangerous is when you start making these blanket statements where it relates to groups of people or occupations. If you say all law enforcement are bad, all judges are bad, all Muslims are terrorists. If you just start making all of these general conclusions about people, it's dangerous and it's inaccurate. It's not true. There's good and bad in everything. You have good lawyers, you have bad lawyers. You have good cops, you have bad cops. You have good people, and you have bad people. That's just life. That's just the way it goes. So to start having good suffer for the bad, it's a problem, and that's not how you change things. That just creates more animosity, and it creates more problems, and it creates more chaos. And that's, I think, what we're experiencing now, just a lot of chaos. And in my opinion, I just don't feel destruction leads to change. I just don't. And trying to deny facts and deny history is not the way to go about it. I'm not saying you gotta love. There's a lot of things everybody personally don't support. Maybe leaders, symbols, statues, paintings, whatever you want to pick. Everybody has different opinions and different ideals of what they look up to, what they believe in, and what they support. How far does it go where you determine, well, this is good, this is not good, this is bad, this is not bad? Now they're taking away movies. They're removing movies that took place. If that's a period in time, and that just represents a genre and a topic within that time, within that decade, within that period, by eliminating it, all you're doing is denying. You're not solving anything, and you're not fixing anything. I know a lot will disagree, a lot will think they are, but they would have to explain to me how that rectifies any kind of issue, any kind of problem. How destruction and destroying something is how you lead to change And it's just not. Those are just personal feelings and rage and reactiveness that results in a short-term relief of stress where you think you're accomplishing something. But nothing's being accomplished in that way as far as trying to bring people together. If you're truly trying to make a change and work on the atmosphere and work on society, I don't believe that's how you go about it. I really don't. It's just going to divide people who feel strongly on each end more and more. Sometimes in life you just have to kind of focus on what you do have in common as opposed to what you don't to get a job done. You know, and if we focus on a whole, I believe everybody, as I said, nobody wants to see corruption. Nobody wants to see people being treated the wrong way because of them happening to be a target due to who they supposedly are, due to the color of their skin, due to their nationality. Nobody wants to see that. Everybody's entitled to a fair shake. And by going around and destroying things and you know, acting in a way that brings, you know, disruption, it's not going to really change the way it should change to create a better generation, to create a more intelligent generation, to create a generation that understands certain things are wrong and how to treat your fellow man and woman and how to treat people by, you know, their based on character and ethics and moral code, not by how they look or their background or anything like that. You know, no superficial judgments. You know, you want to judge somebody by what's inside. And I'm sure, you know, I'll get a lot of negative feedback on this. Those who believe that what they're doing is accomplishing something by destroying historical artifacts and buildings and statues, you know, based on the rage that they're feeling. But again, it really, when you look at it intelligently, it just doesn't make any sense, and it's really not accomplishing anything. You can't deny the past. You can't erase history. All you could do, if we have evolved as a people and as a society, is try to learn from it and grow, understand it, and change moving forward. That was a period in time. That's what took place. You know, I mean, there's a lot of movies that, you know, I don't agree with as an Italian American. I mean, a lot of shows, I've said it before, you get a lot of these reality shows. They make Italians look like morons. You know, they embrace stupid things that they try to associate with Italians, you know, and try to make every Italian look like a gavone or look unintelligent or act a certain way. There's a lot that I don't agree with. A lot of my friends don't agree with. A lot that we wouldn't want on the air. But that's America. You have to deal with it. You know, it's just freedom of expression. And you just don't watch it. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of movies that a bunch of different people, different races, different cultures do not agree with. You know, I had a friend of mine, he's Greek, and he didn't like the way you know, Greeks were portrayed in that Big Fat Greek Wedding movie. You know, something silly where he made a joke out of it, but I'm sure there's a lot who feel strongly about that. I mean, it's a silly example, but my point is, there's so many things in society that not everybody's going to agree with. So what's the answer? You just start removing that? When does it end? What's the test for that? What's the pool that you use for that? What do you put in and then you start taking out? How do you know what to take out? How far does it go? Where everything's going to be censored. If anything's just a little offensive to somebody, it's gone. It's removed. It's eliminated. I just don't agree with that. Not in America. I don't think that's what we stand for. I don't think that's what the country's about. I think it's just getting at a level now that's just too hypersensitive. People are just too hypersensitive to things. If you have movies and you have books, that are era pieces, you know, and time pieces and examples of what was going on during certain times. By pulling them and eliminating them, I mean, that's the answer. It's not an answer, really. It's almost as if you're just trying to do damage control. And how can you do damage control for things that took place that, we have no control over now? That's what went on. That's what went out. I was reading something about a ride in Disneyland, that it was offensive based on the song, in that period. And again, how far does it go? People could be offended by so many things. And is the answer just to eliminate those things? I don't think that's it. If you don't agree with it, move on. Don't support it. But to start tearing stuff down, to start pulling movies, to start censoring this and that, I think it's going down a dangerous path. I think it's really starting to strip humans and, people as a whole, just strip them of their rights. And I don't think a lot are seeing that because that's what they want at the moment. But what happens when they're on the opposite end of that fence? What happens if it's something they may align with that's now in question, that society's looking to eliminate? It's a problem. When you start picking and choosing, it's a problem, and it's a dangerous path. And now I think so many people are just on a crusade to make a change. They're losing sight on how to really do that. And the way to do that is to come together and focus on what you have in common. Not what you disagree with. Because disagreements, you could go on all day. Those type of arguments could be fought all day. So sometimes you got to just focus on, what do you all agree with? And I think, as I said at the beginning, corruption is the big problem. As a whole, if you could focus on corruption and trying to alleviate that and eliminate that, and try to have where everybody receives fair trial and fair treatment to the best of the ability of the system, that would be a win. Because we all, have a gripe in our own way. I'm sure there's a lot of things people have experienced personally, professionally, that they felt they weren't getting treated fairly, some more than others. And that should be the focus. There's nothing wrong with people saying, this happened, I don't agree with it, I don't support it, but it was part of the history, it was part of our past, it's what led us to this point we're at now, and that's where it's at. I don't support it, I don't condone it, I don't agree with it, but that's the history. That's where it was at that point in time, and we've evolved from that. Society has changed, our eyes have opened up in a lot of ways. We become more sensitive to certain things. And moving forward, this is what we're going to focus on. And that would also freeze in time another period. People may reflect back at 2020 in this decade and see the changes that were made. And by keeping these things, it would almost show that change, It would almost show that, well, up until this point, these symbols were what were throughout the country, and then after 2020, this popped up and that popped up, and look at society and how they started to change, and how they started to manifest, and how they started to become more open-minded and become more tolerant and more acceptable. It could serve as that point, as a turning point. And I believe by embracing the turning point, that's where you see production, and that's where you see things improve. But by trying to erase and be destructive and destroy, I can't relate to it personally. I really can't, and I haven't heard a good solid argument to justify it other than, well, we don't believe in it, I don't support it. But that's really not a valid argument, because there's a lot of things people don't support and don't believe in. And you got to try to change it, and you got to try to maybe show that from this point forward, it's a different philosophy. It's a different way of living. That was that time period at that point when that was put up and when that was, built. And then from this point on, focus has shifted. That's how I see it anyway. Again, I'm sure a lot of people will disagree, but I'm going to voice how I see it, and that's just, to me, it doesn't make any sense on every level. I think the focus has to be making sure that corruption, it's going to be almost impossible to eliminate it. Let's be honest. It's going to be impossible to eliminate racism. If somebody's racist and they were brought up that way, no amount of talking about it or trying, they're just not going to change. Some people are just ignorant, and that's really not the people you want to focus on. You want to try to get to the future generations and get to people who are open-minded and maybe, somebody who doesn't see things a certain way. And if they are a reasonable person and they have some intelligence, perhaps some enlightenment could change how they operate and how they function and decisions they make. That's just the way it goes. And all that's going to happen with all that's going on, it's just going to divide things further, because there's going to be proponents on each end that feel very strongly one way or another. And if you start drawing those lines in the sand by doing these acts, it's going to, I personally think it's going to make things worse. I don't think it's going to make things better. And that's why, for me anyway, I try to focus on what's right and what's wrong, even on the show. There's a lot of people, and I say it all the time, I'm not trying to have anybody agree with me. What I try to do is just show all the facts and show what took place. And I appeal to a reasonable person, an intelligent person, an open-minded person who may have felt one way prior to understanding the situation. But you have a reasonable person of intellect when they then could change their mind not to agree with me, just to agree with the basis in which I am trying to talk about, with the understanding of having all of the facts, having both sides, and understanding right from wrong. That's what I try to appeal to. It's not about getting people to understand things on a personal side the way I could relate to them. It's just getting them to understand what's fair and what's not fair, what's just and what's unjust. To me, that's the key. You try to lay everything out, explain it the best you can, show the side, show the law, show what took place, and then have them decide. And the same instance goes for things I talk about on the show. I've seen people in forums and groups, they're just, simple-minded, ignorant individuals, and they don't want to hear the facts. They just want to say, well, if they're guilty of something, then it doesn't matter if they really committed the crime that they're being accused of, because I'm sure they committed crimes in the past, so they should be found guilty. Those aren't the people I look to appeal to, and those shouldn't be the people that others look to appeal to, because you're not going to change their mind. And they're just not intelligent. They don't have the brains to understand logical thinking. They're reactive with their personal feelings. They don't, rather than make a decision with intelligence, they make it with emotion. And when you make decisions out of emotion, that's just, you're not using your brain to the fullest of its potential. Anybody could react out of emotion. The logical thing is to put the emotion aside and make decisions based on what you know is fair, and make decisions based on what is right and what is just. And that's who I try to appeal to on the show. And I totally recognize that I'm fine with not changing minds of closed-minded individuals. I have no problem with that. I'm as far as that kind of stuff, I'm very easy. I'm a person who's completely fine with agreeing to disagree. I couldn't care what people think. I really did. I never did, and I never will. But what I do like is when I'm talking to somebody who could carry a conversation and somebody who is open-minded, I do enjoy the debate, and I do enjoy showing them all sides and then having them conclude. And then if they do weigh everything and they still disagree, that's fine. At least I know that they tried to understand it. They weighed the facts and they reached a different conclusion than I did. And there's nothing wrong in that. That's at least a healthy debate. That's a healthy topic. That's a healthy discussion. But closed-minded people, when you see comments and you see in like these, you got these groupies who hang out in all these forums and they talk about everybody's business, and they'll make comments. Well, they're guilty. They're guilty of something, so it doesn't matter if the evidence wasn't there at trial. Those are just ignorant people. And people like that make me laugh because they're in these forums talking about other people's lives. They're in there all day and night. I was looking at some of the profiles. You got some guys, they made like 10,000 posts. They've been a member of these forums for like 10 years. They're devoting their lives to these things. They have nothing better to do. But the second you try to talk about facts affecting a case, specifically if it's somebody who is painted with organized crime label, if you start talking about that, right away they say, well, they're supposed to have this position, so they're guilty. But in reality, what the hell are you doing on these forums then? I mean, you're in one breath you're a super fan. I don't know, you're digging up pictures on people. You're going on Instagrams. You're going on Facebook. You're building these huge encyclopedias about people's lives that you don't even know. And then when a discussion is made with facts and citations, you deny it to, you try to chalk it up. Well, they're all bad people. All right, well, if they're bad people, why are you supporting them then? Why are you even on forums talking about them? It just makes no sense. It's actually comical. But my point is, those are the closed-minded individuals you don't want to appeal to. Those are the ones that are just, be in those groups, talking a lot of nonsense that they know nothing about. And I'm just referring to on a lot of these groups that are dedicated to Italian people and organized crime and all that. But I'm sure there's groups on every different type. I'm sure there's groups on gangs and there's groups on all different types of groups of people and all similar type topics. And it makes no sense to me. I don't know what you're doing wasting your time on all these forums if you're so against all these people that you're apparently fascinated with in one breath, but then you want to make sure that they're all guilty even if the evidence shows that they're not guilty. Hypocrites. But getting back to the whole corruption thing is just, I feel that's one positive at everything that's going on. Maybe a light will be shined overall on how corruption can take place and how you have a lot of innocent people behind bars due to corrupt law enforcement, corrupt prosecutors, and corrupt judges. Hopefully the public will understand that this does go on, because too many times they're just in the dark and they believe everything that's written in the law books is what plays out in the courtroom. So hopefully in that respect it is eye-opening, because it is a problem. It is a problem, and it affects a lot of different people. It affects the black community. It affects the Italian community. It affects, a ton of people. I'm sure there's a ton of people who could, from different ethnic backgrounds and different races, that could drop me an email or I could go and see. I'm sure there's a million instances that I could point to where somebody was targeted for one reason or another. Whether within their community they were the outcast for some reason, and that's just unacceptable. It's unacceptable. And that's the problem in a nutshell. It should not be allowed, and that's where the change needs to happen. And the officials who control that need to make sure there's accountability all the way from the judge level to the prosecutor level to the law enforcement level. There has to be accountability, and there has to be a set of standards. And there has to be protocol. And the protocol has to be followed. And the evidence should tell the tale. Not bias. Not being a target. That's not what should be the driving force. It should be a crime was committed, and that's how it has to be played out. Everybody has to do their job in relation to the crime that was committed. No fabricating evidence. No bringing in liar, supposed informant witnesses that are out and out liars. No inventing a case, making connections that don't exist. Trying to paint pictures of a situation that just isn't accurate. And especially when they know it's not accurate, when the government themselves is forcing forcing evidence that is not applicable and evidence that is defunct and is inaccurate just to try to secure that conviction. Those are all the things that need to be changed. That's the process that needs to be changed. People going for compassionate releases and not being released, not based on the crime. You have people going for a compassionate release where the crime's gambling, but they supposedly hold some kind of title in a secret society, and they're not getting that release because of that. That shouldn't be a factor. It should all have to do with, what relates to the crime, what relates to the charges. And if somebody is a risk of especially now with this virus going around, if somebody's a high risk of getting it, so basically you're saying they should die in jail? And those are all the problems. That's what everybody should be focused on. All those things need to be changed. And there has to be a checks and balances in place because, as I've discussed in great detail, the judge controls that whole courtroom when you're at the trial level. And there's nothing you can do if you have a blatantly unfair judge. There's nothing you could do. You have to wait to the appeal, which takes years. So now let's say, which is a fact, especially in the case I'm dealing with, when you're dealing with an innocent person who's innocent of all the charges they were convicted of, and now you got to wait for an appeal to get a legitimate shot at a fair review, where you have 3 fair judges that you have to hope for that you have. Years go by. So you have somebody who's innocent of the charges they were convicted of, wrongfully convicted, sitting in jail for years until they finally get justice, God willing, from 3 impartial judges who just go by the law. Those are all the problems. Those are all the things that need to be fixed. That all goes back to just corruption and things not being fair and everybody not getting a fair shot and people being targeted. That really should be the focus. And I feel, as I said, if this brings a spotlight, on the corruption that different groups of people are being faced with, hopefully jurors will be more sensitive to that when they're on that panel. And they'll realize that, people are watching. This isn't something that could be swept under the rug anymore. People are going to take notice. And maybe that'll factor into keeping them honest and making sure they go by the facts moving forward. And not just voting based on what the government wants them to vote and what the judge is hinting for them to vote. That's what I hope comes out of all this. I hope corruption starts to really be put at the forefront. And those in the position of power look to eliminate it and try to make the Constitution play out the way it was intended to play out. And the way the law books read, that's what should be playing out in the courtroom. If you ever notice, there's always a yes, but. And what I mean by the yes, but is you'll have all these rights. You have a right to a speedy trial. And then all of a sudden there'll be, yes, you do, but we're going to do this so you don't. They always negate your rights with something else, with another law to negate it. You can't have hearsay. You're not allowed hearsay. But there's, exceptions to the hearsay rule. We're going to list all the exceptions. And so in one breath you're saying you can't have hearsay, but then you have the exceptions. There's always a yeah, but. And that's the problem. That's how a lot of these things get in. Somebody has to be convicted of murder. You got to be convicted. You got to know about the murder. You got to participate in it. Yeah, but we're going to introduce Pinkerton, which reasonably foreseeable. So you see, they always introduce something to negate what the Constitution had laid out. So they trick you almost to make you think you have this right, and then they strip it away from you. They'll make rulings. A judge will make a ruling. No, this isn't going to be in. Then if things aren't going too well, we're going to let it in now. Yeah, but we'll let it in. And those are the problems. Those are the things that I'm hoping society opens their eyes to and sees what's taking place. And when the average person is in a position on a juror and, serving on a jury panel, and they're in a position to make a change and they're in a position to stop that, I'm hoping all these things enter their mind and they realize how to now look at stuff and how to analyze the situation. Well, that's it for today. I want to thank all the listeners. We're up to subscribers, I should say. I know we broke 4,000, which is really great. I mean, I'm very happy. At the very least, at least people are listening, and maybe, you know, some of the episodes are opening up their mind a little bit, having them understand where I'm coming from, having them understand what takes place at trial and what actually plays out in the courtroom isn't what's written in the books. And I hope we can continue to grow and get the word out there. And I know a lot of people downloaded the audiobook. Again, it's guiltfortheguiltless.com. You get a free ebook, free audiobook. It's just about exposure. That's the only angle there. It's for nothing else. It's just to have people understand what really takes place. And this is supported by factual information, by court minutes, by motions, by evidence. This is factual information. This isn't, solely on opinion. Everything that is written is supported and could be cited and could be pulled up. So it's an interesting read. I've been getting a tremendous feedback on it. And I've been getting a lot of open-minded people, actually. In addition to a few of the closed-minded, ignorant ones, I have seen some open-minded people who actually said they never realized these things took place. And that's what I really appeal to. Just somebody who doesn't understand what goes on, and when they do, they comprehend that it's unacceptable. And that's all you want. Regardless of what they may feel about somebody, they just understand that the topic and what took place was unacceptable. And that's really the main goal. And that's it for tonight. Take care and talk to you soon.